Okay, we have to talk about this Superman casting. So, I will admit, I'm not the biggest fan of Superman. He's never been my favorite hero. I understand why people love Superman. I get it. It's Batman has just always been a better and, in my opinion, more dynamic character. I was never really impressed with the alien from another planet. I always liked more of the character that was rooted in a more complex storyline that didn't pull away or detract from the character with an alien plot. I'm not against alien plots. There's a lot of heroes that I like that have that in their plot narrative, but I just like, a person gets powers somehow, or in Batman's case, he doesn't really have powers, but there's fan theories about Batman having superhuman intellect. Those fan theories have never been confirmed, but they're out there. But this new actor that they have cast for Superman, David Cornswet, I believe that's how you say his name. This dude, okay, what struck me about this dude is how much he looks like Henry Cavil. Now, I was also surprised that he is rather taller than Henry Cavill. He is 6'4" and Henry Cavill is 6'1". I was surprised. I don't know much about this actor, David Cornswet. I will say that I think sometimes to get an unknown actor to play in some of these roles is actually a better thing to do. People don't know the actor. There's no preset bias, whether, there's a bunch of people that like or don't like the actor. You kind of get a clean slate. I think that's smart. So, again, as I said, this dude, his resemblance. Now, there's one picture I want to show, and it's on CBR. I'm going to read an article from Bounding Into Comics, but I definitely want to show you this CBR article, and you tell me if I'm losing my mind or if this dude looks very similar to Henry Cavill. Now, if you're looking at my screen, you cannot tell me that this picture right here, this dude does not look almost exactly like Henry Cavill. I think this was on purpose. It's a good idea. Now, I don't know what James Gunn is going to do with Superman, and I don't know if this movie is going to turn out good. There was a lot of people that assumed because of what James Gunn did with Guardians of the Galaxy that The Flash was going to turn out good. Now, The Flash not turning out good may not be 100% on the shoulders of Gunn. It might be that the expectations were higher than they should have been. But in that regard, that's kind of on him as well, because he was singing the praises of this movie like it was going to be the greatest superhero movie you've ever seen in your life. And it just wasn't. It wasn't. I don't think it was terrible, but it was far from the greatest superhero movie I've ever seen in my life. The Flash was decent at best, which I guess in this day and age, in this superhero movie economy, that's actually doing pretty well. But this guy right here looks exactly like Henry Cavill. Now, why that matters to me is you got to be able to point out when something is done that actually makes sense to the comic. Excuse me. And to cast this young man, I believe he is 30 years old, just turned 30 if I'm not mistaken. To cast this young man as Batman, really, I mean, I don't know what his acting chops are. I looked up some things he's played in. Not really anything I follow like that. Not any movies that I really followed. So I don't know much about him. The look, though, he has it. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to take you to some pictures, different comic book art of Superman, just to show you why I think he fits the look. And if you look at these different Superman images, you can see why. And he's supposed to be playing a young Superman right? So you can see in these images why, like, oh, okay, this dude actually might work as Superman. I can see why they cast him as Superman. Some superhero movies have abandoned this. They have abandoned actually picking an actor that not only has the acting chops, but at least at a bare minimum looks something like the character from the comic book. I mean, give us geeks something. Okay, so I'm going to read this article. This is from Bounding Into Comics. It was written on June 27th. It was written by John F. Trent. James Gunn announces David Cornswet as his Superman and Rachel Brosnahan, I think that's how you say her name, as Lois Lane for Superman Legacy. Superman Legacy director James Gunn announced that David Cornswet will play Superman and Rachel Brosnahan will play Lois Lane in the upcoming film. Deadline initially announced that Cornswet and Brosnahan nabbed the roles, claiming they were among 6 actors who filmed a screen test during June 17th weekend, including Nicholas Hoult, Tom Brittany, Emma Mackey, and Phoebe Denever. I don't know these people. I don't really keep up with Hollywood like that, so I'm sure I slaughtered those names. Now, looking at these pictures, I'm telling you, it's hard for me to look at these pictures and not see that he definitely looks a lot like Henry Cavill. It's my humble opinion that this is one of the reasons they chose him, which is not a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. Again, doesn't mean Gunn is going to do a good job. I would love to give him the benefit of the doubt, but after what he did with The Flash, I mean, he at a bare minimum, he didn't have to come out, being the champion of The Flash being the greatest superhero movie and you're gonna love it. I think he should have just let the movie sink or swim on its own merits, because I think lifting a movie up that much, it's kind of doomed to fail at that point, in my humble opinion. And maybe all of the reports we heard, like about Tom Cruise seeing a movie early and singing its praises, maybe that was all propaganda to get people to like the movie. I'm not saying that's what it is. I don't know. But the movie definitely didn't live up to the hype. When I saw the trailers, I mean, I will admit, I even made a video. I thought it was going to be good. Okay, Gunn confirmed the announcement on Twitter, writing, accurate. They're not only both incredible actors, but also wonderful people. That's good. The confirmation comes after Gunn announced he would no longer have Henry Cavill continue in the role of Superman, despite Warner Bros. Pictures having Cavill return for a cameo role in Black Adam, as well as Cavill announcing he would be returning to the role in future films. Gunn previously claimed he did not continue with Cavill because he'd be focusing on an earlier part of Superman's life. He tweeted, "Our story will be focusing on an earlier part of Superman's life, so the character will not be played by Henry Cavill." Now, I don't know if this is the real reason or maybe it's cover. I mean, who really knows? I'm not in this man's head. I can only go on what he said. This is what he said, so I can go with that. Here's what I'll say. Maybe it was also, you got to think, when you're looking at an actor's age, Henry Cavill is 40. If you're trying to turn the DCEU into something really big and you're trying to carry out multiple stories over multiple years, you got to think, okay, if this thing stretches out 10 years, man, this dude is going to be 50 and playing Superman. Now, he's probably going to still be in good shape. I can see how that would be a problem. James Gunn, coming in after the fact, trying to clean up what was going on in DC's cinematic universe, and that's a big task. So I'm definitely not gonna just drop all the weight on James Gunn like he was supposed to come in like Superman, all pun intended, and fix everything right out the gate. Gunn previously claimed he did not continue with Cavill because he'd be focusing on an earlier part of Superman's life. He tweeted, "Our story will be," I just read that. Cavill would later make it clear that Cavill would not return as Superman because of his age. Cavill just turned 40 and Cornswet turns 30 in July. Brosnahan, I think that's how you say her name, not sure, turns 33 in July. Gunn wrote on Twitter, "As I said yesterday, it is very simple. He's a different age." I can understand that. Now, some people, and in this article, I think they point out some of the flaws with him saying that, and he has some rebuttals to come back and refute some things that people have said. Gunn went on to claim his Superman would be merely younger, and thus Cavill did not fit the bill. Gunn's narrative on why he and Safran canned Cavill changed when they announced the DC Studios late at the end of January. He told the Hollywood Reporter, "I like Henry. I think he's a great guy. I think he's getting," not going to say that word, messed around, let's put it that way, by a lot of people, including the former regime at this company. But this Superman is not Henry Cavill for a number of reasons. Gunn never elaborated on what those reasons were. I get it. If he's trying to have a younger Superman, I get it. I just don't know that maybe there was other reasons and he just didn't want to, fully come out and say it. Maybe it's just this. I mean, like I said, I can only go on what he's saying. Gunn's age narrative would also be called into question following the announcement of the Brave and the Bold film, where Gunn detailed the film is a story of Damian Wayne, who's Batman's actual son that he didn't know exists for the first 8 to 10 years of his life. He was raised as a little murderer and assassin. He's my favorite Robin. Given Batman would be old enough to have a child, there were questions as to how much older Batman would be compared to Superman, given the two are usually depicted as peers around the same age. Gunn addressed those concerns, telling Collider that Superman's working. He's a reporter. He's at the Daily Planet. Again, we're coming into a world where superheroes exist and have existed. Gunn then acknowledged, "So, does that mean Batman might be a couple years older than Superman?" Yes, it could be. And I mean, personally, I think that explanation may be a slight bit of a cop-out. I don't know that for sure, but it seems like that's a possibility. Maybe he just didn't think that fully through, which is always possible. I think this is what happens, especially with DC and Marvel and probably other comic book adaptations into cinema. They want these stories to be cohesive. And even though Marvel had a great formula and how they rolled out everything leading up to Endgame, it was definitely a great formula. I don't think it's necessary for DC to follow their formula. They can go their own way. I personally like the Batman. I didn't think Rob Pattinson would do a good job. I was wrong, in my humble opinion. I think he did a great job, and I think the Batman was a very good movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's disconnected from what I'm hearing and reading from DC. It's disconnected from these other movies. Why'd I say that? Their movies don't necessarily have to be connected to some long overarching story. They can just make movies that are independent of other movies that just so happen to be in the DC cinematic universe. And I wish they would just do that. That would have been a better route than to go the route he went, and explaining that, hey, Batman could be a little older. He could have simply said, look, we're building out this universe, this cinematic universe. These movies aren't necessarily going to be connected or in the same time frame. And I tell you what would have been, in my opinion, an even greater idea if they depicted some of these heroes at different stages of life and the movies were kind of disconnected. And then at some point, made movies later on down the road about these heroes at around the same time when the Justice League was formed, and then moved on from that. So therefore, you wouldn't have to have all of your movies run in succession. They wouldn't have to be at the same time or on the same timelines. I think that would have probably been a better route. He goes on to say, as for what I expect from Superman Legacy, DC Studios CEO Peter Safran revealed during the initial DC Studios slate announcement, it's not an origin story. It focuses on Superman balancing his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing. Superman represents truth, justice, and the American way. I am glad they brought that back. I understand the climate and the time we live in, but I think it's a problem when a lot of these content houses try to drastically change a character and change a character's a mantra because there's some issue with the way this thing has played out. Look, Superman is American history, right? This is part of American history. You can't just go change this just because somebody takes issue with it. So I'm glad they brought that back. I truly am personally. He is kindness in the world that thinks of kindness as old fashioned. That's pretty good. Gunn provided more details in March, writing on Twitter that the film in many ways centers around Superman's heritage, how both his aristocratic Kryptonian parents and his aristocratic, Kryptonian parents, I was bugging out when I read that, and his Kansas farmer parents inform who he is and the choices he makes. I like the fact that they're abandoning the origin stories. I think many of these comic book movies, when they go back to the origin story again and again and again, at this point, I would say in the United States, there's certain characters that we just know. You don't have to create another origin story. Spider-Man, we know. Batman, we know. Superman, we know. We do not need another origin story. Just pick up somewhere in the history of the comic book and run with it. That's okay. I think that was a good choice. Look, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I don't know if this is going to be good. I don't know if this is going to be bad. I'm not going to jump the gun, all pun intended, and say it's going to be good because I thought that about Flash. Obviously, I was wrong. It wasn't terrible, but it definitely was not. I wouldn't call it. It's in limbo. Let's put it that way. The Flash is in limbo. It's not terrible, but it's not necessarily great. It's decent. Only way to put it. It's decent. Is it worth seeing? You could probably wait till it comes to Max if you have Max, if you're paying for it. But I don't know if this is going to be good. Looks wise, Cornswet, yo, that was a dope choice. They found a Henry Cavil lookalike at a younger age and said, yeah, that guy. Maybe his acting is good and maybe this will work out. Who knows?